All right, we're recording. Good morning, Brian. And
Good
this
morning,
is
Haley.
our post-Thanksgiving chat, and we were just catching up and speaking about COVID, and a mutual friend of ours now has COVID. So we were just kind of talking about how the different strains of it and how people are reacting differently when they do test positive.
And the question that I have that has only been alluded to is that the majority of people who are dying are older people in nursing homes.
Mm,
They're way overrepresented in the numbers of deaths, and racial minorities. And a lot of that has to do with health issues
and
from systemic poverty
yep,
and
healthcare,
racism.
access to healthcare.
Right. And no one except for, I think, the lieutenant governor of Texas has said, why don't these old people just, allow this to happen, and so that we don't have to shut down our economy for the sake of people who are, have one foot in on the banana
Right.
peel anyway. And I'm pretty impressed that never came up, as and maybe it did in homes and bars, but it never came up in the media that I saw, that we were focusing too much attention on people who were already, at the latter part of Act 3.
Right. They were
Uh,
already compromised.
right, right, and so we're sending millions into poverty. We're changing the role of women in the workplace, setting them back many years. And there are just lots of negatives to letting the economy crash. But I'm glad that we're a culture that didn't, and I don't know that it was had anywhere. I never heard it anywhere. Say, this is a lot of fuss for people, who know they're going to die anyway.
Yeah, I did hear it earlier on.
Did
Um,
you?
and that was mostly from the people that are very sort of against the lockdown, against the
Mm-hmm.
masks.
Mm-hmm.
However, these are the same people that are also very pro vaccinations. So it sort of asks that question of how can you be pro vaccination which is basically protecting the community, when you're not that concerned about, the elderly population, and you're not that concerned about wearing a mask. To me, it's the same thing. If you're going to wear a mask, you're pro vaccination, vice versa. It's the same thing. You're still protecting. So there wasn't, but again, it was the minority. It was a handful of people that are very
Mm-hmm.
on that side of the fence. And they have that mindset sort of from a political perspective, a global perspective, an American perspective. But I think, it raises a really good highlight, which is underrepresented, is that we're still valuing humanity
Mm-hmm.
with everything
I
it
was
feels like
also,
it's going wrong.
yeah, I was impressed too, and this is unrelated, but I was impressed with the media's reporting on Elliot Page.
I
Uh,
love
they,
that.
I, because in the beginning, I, they said Elliot Page on the umbrella, whatever, and we don't
Yeah.
watch that. So I thought, who's that? And it was only when they put in, Oscar winning, and uh, Elliot has said that they are gender neutral. At least that's what I saw, that they're non-binary. And I was a little disappointed that a gay news service um, used a male pronoun. They were trying to be supportive,
Right.
but they hadn't yet caught up with the fact that even with non-binary people, they prefer neither male nor female pronouns, but the
This is
pronoun they.
very timely, because I actually have a question about that. It's something that we were
Good.
talking about. Obviously, Elliot Page is now, I think, so courageous to be sort of the forefront of this discussion now. And for
Uh-huh.
in the house that I am, that discussion is about how do you use the pronouns now?
Mm-hmm. Well,
So
you
when
use
is it
them
appropriate to use his, her, or his,
as
him, or she, her? What
never with a person who is uh, says they're non-binary, then it's never appropriate to use
okay.
his or her. Uh, they,
They.
it's the
Okay.
best we've got, they and their. And, the hard part for those of us who were trained writers is that you have a singular subject, but you're using a plural pronoun. Uh, it's like fingernails on a chalkboard.
Chalkboard.
The funny thing about that cultural reference is they don't have chalkboards anymore. So young people,
Just don't
people
get
here,
it.
fingernails on a chalkboard. What's that? What's that? What are you talking about?
I
But
think it
yeah,
definitely applies to this conversation, because I'm sure for those people that are choosing pronouns for themselves, I'm sure when they hear somebody mess it up, it feels like nails on a chalkboard.
yeah,
So for a non-binary person, and obviously it's their choice. I would
yes,
imagine the best word is, the first sort of stepping stone is to say, how would you like to be referred to? But when somebody uses she, her, which I
uh-huh,
see now more and more common in people's signature lines on
yes,
the emails, you see she, her, or he, him.
mm-hmm.
Is that what is the designation there? That they're aligning with being feminine or woman?
No, no. What that is their effort to participate in the inclusiveness of pronouns, so that non-binary people or people who are transgender aren't the only ones who are giving us guidance on what pronouns to use. So in lots of places, obviously more blue state than red state, you'll find cisgender people, cisgender meaning people who are not transgender. You'll find cisgender people putting as they sign off the pronouns that they prefer to be used, and
Okay.
they're only really doing it to say, I'm going to participate in this, and so you don't feel all by yourself out there.
And I
Uh,
think for me, what really clicked when you said that, it's a helpful guideline. It's
mhm.
helping other people sort of ease into that sort of thing of like, okay,
Mhm.
now I know how to refer to you. So that's rather
Yeah,
than more of the I'm making a statement. It's like, no, I'm helping you understand where I am on this spectrum.
right.
And in
It's
the same time, supporting everybody else.
and some are saying I need to do this so that you know
Mm-hmm.
who I am. But the majority, and a few, it wasn't long ago. I think it was even this year when I was advising some people in finance about it. At the time, I suggested, I think it's going a little too far, that you should in corporate, settings feel the need to put he, his, underneath the CEO's name or her, she. But I can see why. Uh, I can see why for some people it's political correctness gone nuts.
Right.
Uh, but for others, it's, I can do that.
Okay. So it just applies then to the gender. It doesn't apply to sexual preference, if that makes sense.
That's right. It has
Okay.
nothing to do with sexual orientation.
Sexual
Uh,
orientation.
yeah, and
And
we
just to
use
clarify,
orientation,
yes,
yeah,
thank you. I
rather than
wanted to
preference.
clarify, because
Yeah.
if you can just explain too the different, why it's I think better to use sexual orientation versus sexual preference.
Well, it's not just better. It's accurate, more accurate.
Yeah.
Uh, um, I'm oriented towards men without a choice involved. Now, after 72 years, or minus the period in my life when I wasn't aware of such thing, but certainly since I was 5, I've had an awareness of these attractions. But at that early age, it wasn't my preference.
Mm-hmm.
I would have preferred to be attracted to girls because it would have been a lot easier.
Lot
I wouldn't have
easier.
been so scared all the time. So often people on the right will deliberately say preference to support the misinformation that one has a choice in their orientation. Now, they'll never acknowledge choosing to be straight, but they somehow feel that people who are gay, lesbian, bisexual had a choice in their orientation. Bisexual people have no choice to be bisexual, but they have a choice, because of their ability to be attracted to both genders. To further confuse you, I can say now that being gay is my preference. I would rather be gay than straight.
But that's because it's who you are.
Not only that, but for me, it's a joyful experience. And it's an experience that has the opportunity to expand one's soul with more stimuli than one generally gets in a straight person's lifetime. We're constantly challenged by difference. And so I really, love the fact that I am gay. It would be a preference now, but in referring to somebody's orientation, it's best to say orientation. Rather than, and there are other terms that I'm kind of liking now. Some people are using sexually fluid, which references their ability to be attracted to both genders. Now, if you're non-binary, you wouldn't say both genders. You'd say my ability to be attracted to all people, right?
Okay.
Regardless of how they gender themselves. At some point, I mean, everyone has to acknowledge that the vast majority of the population is pretty traditional in the comfort they have in the biologically assigned sex that they had. And we say assigned, what was the sex you were assigned at birth? Because the doctor or midwife, is the first one to announce it's a boy, it's a girl, and they're totally basing it on a quick look at the genitalia. There are people who have a traditional male or female genitalia who don't identify as
very
that
early
sex.
On.
Yeah, and there are people whose genitalia is ambiguous to the average person. So the old term for that was hermaphrodite. The term today is intersex. And the issue around intersex is that for many, many, many years, the advice of doctors would be to create a vulva because it is easier surgically to create a vulva from the skin of the scrotum and the penis to create a very sensitive nerve ending area than it is to, from the vulva and clitoris, try to create a functioning male reproductive system. And it's clearly not reproductive because they can't create sperm or ejaculate. When this is probably far more than you want, but when a person transitions or realigns, and again, now here's terminology you might find interesting. For years, we've used the term the person transitioned, from male to female. Yeah. And the preferred term today is that they realigned because they're not going from A to B, they're staying A. They're just realigning the body that came with A so that it properly reflects that they are an A. Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense.
Yeah. So if a person is realigning their body to match their male identity, it's more expensive and more difficult to create a phallus, one that can get erect, and also one through which you urinate. There is a surgery through which you can connect the urethra through the created phallus, but it's very expensive. Yeah. And so what's happening often now, Haley, is that and more often in younger transgender or queer gender people, they choose not to fuss with the genitalia. They do top surgery if they have a woman's anatomy. They do, they have their breasts removed, and they take hormones to create male, um, more male characteristics, or they have surgically implanted breasts, but they don't remove their penis because younger people don't care. They say, I don't, I'm marrying a person, not a body.
Do you think that's a step in a positive? And when you talk about alignment, do you think that's a step in alignment, or how do you view that step where people are now becoming just more comfortable in their bodies, but aligning with their true selves?
I think it's great. I think it's great because what they're basically saying is, I know who I am. I know my light, and my light doesn't need to shine by changing this body totally to
Yeah.
fit your expectations of what my body should look like when I tell you that I am Mary,
Yeah.
or Claire. um, uh,
I am so energized by that, because I think it's, the whole thing, are you happy with the movie, and how we sort of started this thing, which was very much sort of the LGBTQ, foundation, but turning that over into aligning with your true light and truly who you are. And a lot of
yeah,
that is looking at other people and saying, I'm not responsible for your mindset.
that's right. And I'm only responsible for my own and
Yeah.
my own happiness. And you're not going to create my happiness.
Yeah.
Now, there are factors that the person has to take into consideration. One is, okay, at some point down the line, I'm going to be needing help. I'll either be in a hospital or I'll be in a nursing home, whatever. And if I don't have money, then I'm not going to be able to choose the health care that I get. And I'm going to have to deal with the lack of cultural sophistication on the part of the healthcare worker, if indeed I haven't changed my body completely to match their expectation of what clairvoyant should look like.
I like that little step in.
A little segue.
I like it a lot. Yeah. And it's, it's been something that I have been in my own work and with my clients has been sort of a really big topic. And it started sort of building up through October, November. It really gained steam. But towards the middle of November, the week before Thanksgiving, it really started being at the forefront of all of my sort of client discussions, which was about, you're not responsible for how other people feel. If they're intimidated by you, that's their learning, that's their growing. And it has been, for me at least, again, has been around mental health. Everybody sort of, again, putting labels on what mental health is. And it started at mental health, it started at depression, it very quickly sort of escalated to suicide. And then now the discussion is about death and how we have those constraints around the death experience. Everybody that
So
I have
go ahead.
spoken to, and I have worked with death a lot over the last 3 years, just because it's an experience I think is beautiful. And I help people either transition the person that is dying, I help them transition, but I also help the families understand the process as I see it and the information that I'm given. And
How do you see it?
I see it as a beautiful experience. It's so full of light, so full of love, and so full of the biggest smiles. So for me, the person that transitions, the happiness, the joy in that soul is so completely opposite to what it looks like from the body perspective.
Mm.
The body looks like it's this weak, flailing vehicle and something you should be concerned about. But the soul inside of it, which 9 times out of 10, by the time the body really starts switching off, the soul's already left. The
Mm-hmm.
soul's already transitioned and is on the other side and has so much relief, so much peace, and is this joyful being. And the biggest sort of paradox that I get is that death is painful. Most people are so concerned about the person passing. The people that is left behind, they feel that, and this is, again, in my experience, the overwhelming response that I have seen and helped people through is they see death as this very dark door, and that there's this trial in between sort of the person passing and wherever they go next.
Mm-hmm.
Did they get to where they need to go? And hopefully it's heaven in a way that's peaceful, and just let me know that they're in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
And, death isn't like that. I
Mm-hmm.
don't see any of that darkness. I don't see any of that sort of trial. You're always supported by guardians and angels. And when death comes, they're holding your hand. There's no chasm that you have to step over. There's no test to get onto the other side. It's this very seamless, all right, there we go.
Yeah, I posted this week what was attributed to Spinoza,
Yeah.
and I don't know whether or not, as somebody told me that he wrote in Latin, and so this seemed like a fairly updated translation, but in it, and a lot of people responded positively to it. I printed it because it reflects my belief. It was God speaking, saying, don't be thinking about heaven. This is, what you have right now, that is your heaven.
That is.
And don't be thinking about an afterlife right now. That's not your concern. And I did a lot of study of near-death experience because I wanted to feel as if I could be of some use to somebody who is transitioning. We don't have proof of anything. All we have is the testimony of some people who have been through what would be called a medical death, and they came back from it, and they all share similar stories about peace. Um, and also, I don't know if this comes from them or from people who are projecting, but a review of life. Do you believe in the review of life, that you see, you go through a
So
review of what your
I
life is
have
like?
had one near-death experience, and then I've also been on the edge where I've sort of I've had that window where I'm like, I see that I have a window.
Mm-hmm.
So I've done the first near-death experience. I was 14, and I very clearly went over. I had Archangel Michael on one side, Metatron on the other side, and walking with them. And there was the choice for me: do you want to go or do you want to stay?
Mm-hmm.
And there was that, for me at least in my experience, there was that review of, if I leave now, what does that mean for the soul journey? Versus if I go back, what does that mean for the soul journey? And for me, it was, all right, I've come this far. I know I can change things, because in every death experience, you gain experience, you gain tools to help your soul move forward. So that experience at 14 and being able to have that review allowed me to say, right, I think I have the tools to make something of this life. So I chose to come back. It took
If you have the choice.
and I think again, in my experience in my own experience of
Mm-hmm.
having that near-death experience and actually going over,
Right.
and then also being at the window where it's like, you have the opportunity. Do you want to take it or do you want to stay before
Mm-hmm.
you even flatline? the choice has been there. In my experience of working with people that have either committed suicide or have died from illness like cancer or car crashes, sort of those surprising deaths, there's always been the choice, always been the choice
of
of going or coming.
even after a car crash.
Yes. There's always, what I have seen is that before the car crash even happens, the soul decides, is this going to be the time that I go, or am I going to stay?
Huh.
And again, this is my experience and how I've seen it, what I've been shown when I've worked with people that have, and their families that have departed surprisingly. The soul has very clearly before said this is going to be the time, or they've said maybe not, let me see how it goes. And then there have been the ones where have thought it was the time, and then as they've started crossing over, being like, no, I want to go back, and I've come back.
Yeah, I see. I can get my arms around that if the person, if their body still could function. If their body couldn't function, then it would be pretty hard to come back, I would think. But so tell me, Haley, this: when you're comforting a family of a person who died young, how different is your approach than for somebody whose death was expected?
The fundamentals of the approach is the same. I just say the truth of what I'm being shown. It's always the truth of what I'm being shown. I try to, because it's when I am in that position of comforting a family, I allow the guides to give the words that are necessary and appropriate for that family. If I start interjecting my own opinions and how I feel it should be delivered, it's no longer truthful, and it's no longer appropriate and necessary for the person that I'm assisting through this process. So truth is always the number one foundation. If I feel like the words are harsher, because what I have found is like, us in our human experience, we always like to sugarcoat things, and we always like to put our own biases into it. So there are moments where I'm like, whoa, that's pretty harsh. And I always check before I say it again, before I actually deliver the message. I'm always like, are you sure you want to use those words? And then I'm always, this is what they need to hear. Again, most of the time that I've helped people transition, they just want the comfort that that family member is happy, that they're okay. And then it switches on to them, how they're feeling, how they're dealing with it. And again, the resistance comes from societal conditioning of what death should be, what the death experience is. And their resistance to that is to sort of, and the conversation at that point is getting through that resistance so that they can open up to the truth of the circumstances.
You have no fear of your own death?
No. No.
I don't either, but but I also feel that I have the benefit of being able to say that I've had a full life, and I'm 30 years older than you are. So I can say to myself, at least, you have had, you've lived like a prince. You've had, you've had the ability to buy beautiful things and enjoy them. You've had love. You've had a career that touched people's lives. You've made a difference. So letting go of this experience doesn't feel very hard to me.
It's interesting because we were in Palm Springs. We went to Joshua Tree, and in Joshua Tree there's a lot of rock scrambling. So you climb over rocks. You're allowed to just go up as high as you want. There's nobody saying safety first. And one of the things that I do have is a fear of heights. And that raised, at that time, I was sort of, a part of me is very adventurous. And then when I start getting up high, I'm like, can you get down?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I have
I
that
can
sort of
identify with that.
fear of wobbliness. And I had that thought. I'm like, okay, if you're truly okay with death, why are you so afraid of being up so high and falling?
Mm-hmm.
And that for me is just that trigger to remember, Haley, you're not going to die today. Like,
Right.
relaxing and accepting death is also knowing that sometimes you're just not going to die that day. But if it is your day and you do choose to go, it's not going to be painful.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be
Except for the people who,
it's going to be painful for the people that stay, but
mm-hmm.
for the person that is, passing over and moving through the
Mm-hmm.
door, it's not painful.
Mm-hmm. I think that what we're describing is what everyone would really like to believe happens.
I think there's some truth in that.
I do. I think everyone would like to believe that's what that, even people who are fundamentalist or, super orthodox in their traditional beliefs or behaviors, religious behaviors. I think there's the hope that when they die, it's going to be peaceful and joyful. But I don't think most people think about dying. I think most people, and I think if more people thought about dying, it might impact their behavior.
It may. And I'm being sort of pushed to clarify things here. So
Okay.
the soul does not experience pain at death. So again, if I'm looking at the situation where I'm standing on a rock and I feel like I'm getting kind of high and how am I going to get down? I can always climb up. Climbing down is the concern for me. And,
Right.
I'm saying, why are you worrying? Death isn't painful. The soul leaves the body carries the pain. So when we're talking about reincarnation and past lives and having to deal with the trauma of a tragic or a traumatic death, that is held in the physical aspect of the body.
Mm-hmm.
So there is, when being clear about the difference between the physical and the soul, the spiritual side. The
Mm-hmm.
true soul, the truth of the soul does not feel pain. Pain is a human emotion. It is a human feeling. So it's held in the physical body.
Right. Related to nerve endings and
Nerve endings to DNA, all that kind of stuff. So
I want to transition if I can.
Yeah.
With something that something you just said that is a great metaphor for shining one's light. And you said, I'm not afraid of climbing higher. It's the descent that scares me. And choosing, in my experience, choosing to celebrate being gay, there was a great energy around it. And I soared for years with it. At some point, I think you get to a level and you're not sure whether or not going higher is an option, at least with that particular light
that ray of light.
That ray of light, and you start thinking about becoming aware of the descent. And by that I mean the excited energy that surrounds you and your journey. If you feel it dissipate, and some of this may come from retirement, in terms of, I've shown my light, I've gotten great response to it. Now there doesn't seem to be much interest in it, demand for it. Do I just live at this level, or do I start another journey with a new light? Does that make sense to you
It
at all?
totally makes sense. And I think it
Uh,
fits with, societal conditioning that when you're retired, that's your descent. And I don't think that that's what it's about. I think the human experience is about always just returning to your higher self and adjusting, and always about the ascent. Of course, in the ascent, there are the descents where you learn and you get the energy to go higher. But,
mhm.
when something starts dimming, that, in my experience, is always a signal to say, expand your perception. There's other possibilities, there's other opportunities that are now opening up for you that allow you to continue the ascent.
But maybe not in a sense with the same focus.
Not with the same focus.
Right.
And I
I mean,
think
so
that's how we have, people going from doing these extreme changes. I did an extreme change where finance was the light for me. I was super successful in finance. Had I carried on that track, I would continue to be super successful. But for me, the light was dimming. I didn't see how I could be happy in that. So that light
mhm.
almost shut off, where it's like, now we need you to look a little bit over here. Do you see all those other lights? Go for them.
I sort of define light as a unique characteristics and qualities. Do you think of light in the same way?
So light, each of us we have a light in our heart, and that expands out and becomes sort of this massive, big, bright, radiant aura. When we're looking at our unique purpose, we all have a unique light, unique vibration. The foundation of that is all the same. My light is the same light as you. The source of my light is the same source that is your light.
Mm-hmm.
The source of my frequency is the same source of your frequency, but yet our frequency is different. The way that my light shines is different from yours. It may not be massively different, but it's just a little bit different. So when I look at, for me, the expansion of my light and the fan of possibilities that come out from that, it's almost like these rays of light that come out. And some are brighter, some are dimming. So when I look at where is my highest and best path, which is the brightest path for me, that is a ray of light that is an offshoot from my heart.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it does. I think a lot of us define ourselves too quickly.
Mm-hmm.
That quote by Spinoza is something that you could have written and I could have written.
Yeah.
And I think it carried weight because people recognize the name as having something to do with philosophy. And he's dead, so it must
He's
be
some
true
famous
or
guy.
whatever. Yeah. So it's all got to be true. But I could have written and have, if you put pieces of my writings together, that it would be the same basic light. Because it was let's assume that what he wrote is the truth, that this is a great representation of the divine. And but so each of us has the ability to tap into that same source and come to the same conclusion. I always get excited when I'm watching a program, a movie or a TV series, and the dialogue written by the writer, or the whoever is, scripting is so in tune with my own beliefs. I get excited because it's a reinforcement that this is going on all around us, right? That this light exists in all of us. We sometimes feel lonely with it. Sometimes we feel like, we're nuts. We think this, but we're really not that
We're
smart,
not.
or
Yeah.
we're not that smart, or we're really not,
It's time for the
theologian. We're
straitjacket.
not trained theologians,
Yeah.
trained philosophers. But we can stumble upon through life experiences and um, uh, meditation, because a 10-year-old doesn't have life experiences, but a 10-year-old ought to be able to, if confined to a bed where they're not distracted by other 10-year-olds, to come to the same truth, right?
Absolutely. And I think resonance is our signal for truth.
Mm-hmm.
So, energy, which we call now electricity, whenever you have something resonating at the same frequency, it kind of does it comes into alignment and it does a little buzz.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
resonant. Truth has a frequency which resonates with our pure hearts, the truth of who we are. It's the same frequency. So when we hear those things and we have that little zzz, this is good, it means we're aligning with the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we all need to, meditation is one of the reason why everybody touts it is because meditation allows you to calm down so you can feel that. You can physically feel the resonance. And that's how we know we're on the right track, we're on the truth. So I always encourage my clients, this is what I'm saying, but unless it resonates, it doesn't mean anything.
Mm-mm.
It doesn't mean anything. And if it doesn't resonate, question it. Be curious. Ask questions. All of this to say that we are all of the same source, even though we have unique vibrations and unique displays of our light, we're all of the same source. And of that source is one truth. So when a soul comes back to that truth and lines up with it and zzz, which will be the word of the day, zzz,
Yes.
aligns with that and falls into the frequency of that, that's the soul coming back to the pure truth.
I've had the experience of being on a plane and reading a book and stopping because my heart, it felt like my heart jumped in recognition of my truth being manifested in somebody else's words.
Yeah.
And it can be so moving that I can tear up.
Absolutely.
Involuntarily there is this, and it's not a sadness,
It's an
although there
overwhelming.
is a touch of sadness because it acknowledged a loneliness that you have felt in and I think that most people probably feel lonely, that even those who run with a big pack of the big dogs, they don't trust their place in it.
Mm-mm.
They wonder, if they really knew who I was, or I really don't agree with all of the things being said around me, but I don't know where else to go. But when we feel it, and I think it does. One, it's exciting because we feel not alone, but it also touches us with a little bit of sadness, and acknowledging the isolation that we have felt.
Yep. And I found, through my journey, there have been the tears of grief, the tears of injustice, and hardship. But those tears, as I've sort of worked through that, those tears now become more and more of the heart tears of overwhelming joy, of this feels so good and I'm so grateful. The only thing that my body's reaction is just to cry.
Mm-hmm.
But like you say, there is, for me, there is that touch of sadness because similarly to you, a sadness of how far away I had got from myself and how far away I'd got from separated. And then there is that loneliness because there's nobody to share it with.
Well, that's the truth, is that it's rare to happen upon somebody who, exactly echoes, your perceptions in life. And you cling to those who approximate it. I think that's one of the fun things about our conversation, is that we sort of felt like we were in good company, that the other, without an awful lot of understanding. I mean, how did this happen? I mean, it just, seriously, when you try to explain it, it's too hard to say, well, we hit it off,
we hit it off.
And we decided to keep talking.
Yeah. And every time I let go and get out of my own way, and I call them miracles. These miracles happen more and more and more. And that's the validation of, okay, this letting go actually works. Keep doing it. Keep going for it. Don't worry about the fall. And I think it's, we need the people like Elliot Page to stand up and be like, this is who I am. And I'm not going to explain it. Because the more that we explain things, the more that we are then going in trying to make other people comfortable with who we are.
Right.
And we're exacerbating that social conditioning.
What I felt great about with it was the respect that Elliot was given, at least in all the news sources that I saw, that tried very hard to not, first of all, not use Elliot's other name to explain the story. They didn't say, the former.
Yeah. The artist formerly known as.
Yeah, Prince, right.
So I have a question for you there, Brian. Do you think that level of respect and the way that it played out for Elliot, do you think that's attributed because of their career as a respected actor? Or do you think it's attributed to who they are as a person, that unique light?
I think it's multifaceted. First of all, clearly, Elliot's career and currency, to be in a program at the moment that was successful, gave them, well, first of all, it became newsworthy. It wouldn't be really newsworthy, I don't think, if the person didn't have a spotlight on them already. And, if it was a Black transsexual, wouldn't even make the news unless it was Laverne Cox, who was harassed recently for being transgender on the street. But the other part is the person doing the reporting. That we've done a good job. One of the things I think we need to say to ourselves is we've done a good job in helping each other expand our understanding, so that when a situation like this comes along, we know how to respond appropriately, right?
Do you think that's a benefit of how 2020 has been in terms of the riots and sort of the incendiary nature of 2020, or do you think it's something else?
I think long before 2020, I've been working on this for most of my life, so I'm pretty pleased when I see people responding and feel like, well, somewhere along the line, the energy you put out there is present. Uh, I feel that some of the protests in the cities and the talk of defunding the police uh, contributed to some people shutting down on their efforts to be supportive. One, because they were scared by right-wing news sources that said these people are going to take over your town, the suburbs aren't safe. And that may have shut down the openness of some people to difference, right? That's where I think a lot of us, found ourselves in camps on each side of a river. But no, I think as a culture, we've really worked hard, at least in the years I've been alive, at understanding things. And, it won't be long if it's not already true that there'll be a non-binary character in a storyline.
TV show. Yeah.
Movie or play or TV show.
I think in circling back to that question or the statement that you said about like that review of life, I think what just hit me now in terms of, as we're getting to the end of 2020, we've had Thanksgiving, if you're in America, and then we're coming towards the end of 2020 and sort of reviewing the life of 2020. And I think it's very quick and easy for us to see 2020 as the standout event.
Is a mess.
And it's a mess, but it also really did, open up again those other possibilities of light and really get people speaking about conversations that they wouldn't necessarily have and behaving better. Some have chosen to behave worse. Either way, it's been this very sort of enlightening year. But I think it's important to look back and say 2020 wasn't just it. It took decades of people like yourself working and striving and going through hardship to be able to allow 2020 to be the year that it is. To get us to the point where Elliot Page can come out with a statement and it's received in the way it was.
Yeah, without laughter.
Without laughter, it's taken very seriously and very sort of with open hearts. It was like, oh, that's cool. That's great. And even the fact that, some people didn't even pay much attention, I think that's even a huge step in the right direction. I'd rather people sort of just be like, not be concerned about it and just be like, oh, of course, or it doesn't really bother me, than go the other side where they're like, oh, that's so wrong.
Yeah, Elliot allowed themselves to be a teaching moment. You don't get much time. The media attention doesn't last forever. Everyone will talk about it for a bit and ask questions over the dinner table, or in some households just laugh at it, thinking that it's ridiculous. It's less funny, I think, for some people because the person who is doing this was in their mind a famous female. If it was a famous male who was now talking about being non-binary, we don't cut as much latitude for biological males than we do biological female in some areas. Especially in terms of not claiming forever their maleness.
Right. If Brad Pitt came out and said that he was,
yeah, he's gender neutral.
Yeah, if he came out as Barbara Pitt, it would be huge.
Right. It was huge. It would be huge and lots of jokes. So that's something for us to think about and ask ourselves about why we have this double standard. But it's all part of us, peeling this orange.
Yep.
And pulling the sections apart to better understand these dynamics in our lifetime. and people after us, I'm a generation, you're another generation, but generation after generation, it's all going to follow us. Hundreds of generations are going to follow us, probably, maybe thousands, maybe millions of generations will follow us on this planet. And maybe we'll be back, over and over and over again to,
Mm-hmm.
continue to participate in the answering of these questions. I don't know. We won't know until, and even if it happens, we won't know, I guess.
Right. And I think, the most beautiful thing today about our discussion, Brian, is that humanity is not lost. Because the underlying core of all of this is, even though on the surface it looks like we're, putting other things at a higher priority, at the core, we still all value humanity.
We're good people. I mean, people have the capacity, regardless of political persuasion or religion or gender or race or whatever. We have the capacity to be magnificent,
Yeah.
to be angels, to tap into that part of us that is magnificent, that's just so loving and giving and caring. We have the capacity to do that.
Always.
And
It's never lost.
And we each have the capacity to be evil in our
Mhm.
behavior, mean, and to honk the horn.
That's actually the topic of my next newsletter, is delving into the darkness and the shadow and trying to explain how they're on the same spectrum.
Which dog do you feed?
Mhm.
It's and we choose, we participate in it.
Yeah. Good stuff.
It is good stuff. I'm conscious of the fact that if you and I choose to continue to do this, even with our plan of having other people on to help us go down different byways in our exploration of our truths, that we're going to repeat ourselves, and that's okay. Because it sometimes takes, a long time for it to sink in, even when you're saying it. It takes a while for it to sink in.
And every time, repetition again is one of those words like perfection. Even though it sounds the same, it always feels different. And sometimes if it feels the same, it always sounds different. So it goes back to that whole resonation thing. If you just, change one word up, it resonates differently with different people. So repetition I'm a big fan of it, in a good way.
Well, listen, I told my story over and over and over again. And there was a part of me that was really tired of it. It was my tool to teach people. But I also grew each time I told it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Got brighter.
I saw something new. I appreciated something differently each time I told it. I'm a very different person.
You're a wonderful person, Brian.
And you're a wonderful person, Haley.
You're one of my favorite people, and I haven't spoken to you, and I think it's been, we skipped
2 weeks.
Thanksgiving, but it's been 2 weeks, and it just felt like it's been years. So I'm super excited. I do need to send you my information for Miami, but I am super excited to see you in Miami.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Couple weeks. So it's going to be a lot of fun, and
It's in the next couple weeks.
So we arrive on the morning of the 18th. We leave here on the 17th. We get there on the morning of the 18th. So it's in 2 weeks, I think.
Right.
I don't know. Time is flying by. This week has flown by. So I'm super excited about that. And until then, I think we're going to be speaking every week. Yeah. Did I lose Brian? Are you there, Brian?
I am, honey. We had a little blip.
Yeah. So we're going to be speaking every week. I think we might take a break over Christmas, depending on what day that falls on or what's going on.
Yeah.
But, and then we'll start revving up some guests.
And we've already started, each of us, at contacting people, and our lists are very different because of our life experiences.
Yeah.
Yours and my list of the people that we, are going to invite on. So that's going to be a great mix-up.
I think it's going to be awesome. I'm excited. Super excited. Lots of love to you, Brian, and we'll be in touch. Bye.